Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in. The first time the Solari encountered Earth, they dismissed it as nothing more than a speck of dust in the vast galaxy. From their distant orbit, the planet looked weak, its surface still caught in the struggles of life, cities barely flickering with the faintest traces of technology, its skies a battlefield of storms and clouds. They saw no advanced structures, no traces of hyperspeed technology, no signs of a race that could challenge their empire. In their ancient records, Earth was barely a footnote, a young world with no significance. They didn't even bother to send a diplomatic message. They didn't need to. Earth was primitive, and in the grand scheme of things, it was hardly worth the time. What they didn't know was that, buried beneath the surface of this unassuming world, humanity had been building something that would shatter their assumptions forever. Deep within the mountains of Siberia, in a complex so secret even the most powerful governments couldn't touch it, scientists and military leaders worked in isolation, perfecting a project that no one had ever dared imagine. A ship? No, a fortress, designed not just for space travel, but for war. The Horizon. The Horizon was no ordinary ship. It was an entire ecosystem of weapons, armor, and technology, crafted from the strongest materials ever known to humanity. Its purpose wasn't exploration. It wasn't peaceful contact with alien civilizations. It was made for survival. It was made to make sure that if anyone ever dared threaten Earth, they would face something unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It was humanity's first true weapon, a weapon that had been kept secret for years, its existence only whispered in the darkest corners of military forums. And if the truth got out, the consequences would be devastating. If the universe learned of the Horizon, it would be seen as humanity's only hope, or its final downfall. But when the Solari arrived, they made a grave mistake. They thought Earth was young. They thought it was weak. They thought the people of this world had nothing to fight for. They had no idea about the Horizon. But when the Solari descended, their massive warships gliding silently through the heavens, humanity had no choice but to respond. The sky above Earth split open with a thunderous roar as their fleet entered the atmosphere. These ships were unlike anything humans had ever seen, sleek, brutal, and covered in armor that shimmered with deadly, unfamiliar energy fields. From the ground, it looked like the heavens themselves were opening up to swallow the planet whole. People froze. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. Cities halted. Everything beneath the great ships seemed like an ant colony waiting to be crushed beneath an iron boot. For a brief moment, humanity thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding even. Maybe they had come to share their knowledge, to offer a helping hand, like so many alien cultures had before. But then the Solari spoke, and all hope shattered. "This world is insignificant," their leader's voice boomed, speaking directly into every communications channel across the globe. "Its inhabitants are primitive. You will submit, or you will be eradicated. Prepare for relocation." Relocation. The word echoed across Earth, sending a chill down the spines of every person who heard it. At first, it seemed almost like a miscommunication. After all, who could have believed that a race of interstellar invaders would talk about relocating an entire planet? But then the true meaning became clear. The Solari didn't view Earth as a home to be respected. They viewed it as a resource to be stripped bare. They would take what they wanted, wipe out those who resisted, and leave a hollowed-out world behind, an empty husk of what it had once been. The word relocation was their polite euphemism for mass extinction. The nations of Earth panicked. Global leaders, from presidents to kings to dictators, scrambled for answers, locking themselves away in secure bunkers, hoping that their vast arsenals of missiles and weapons would somehow be enough to stand against the alien armada. But deep down, they knew better. The Solari were too powerful. Their ships glided effortlessly above the planet, making humanity's missiles seem like toys. No weapon on Earth could ever come close to matching their technology. Within days, the first wave of Solari forces landed. Small, black craft, like predatory insects, descended from the motherships. They unleashed wave after wave of devastation. Power grids were shattered, cities were burned to the ground, communication systems were jammed, silencing the planet's ability to coordinate any form of defense. Within a week, humanity's global infrastructure was in ruins. The Solari had their forces on the ground, and they were methodical. The cities fell one by one. Soldiers fought valiantly, but they were no match for the Solari's advanced weaponry. Every resistance met with a swift and decisive counterattack. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the Solari would succeed. Earth's defenses were crumbling, and its people were being overwhelmed. Panic spread like wildfire as citizens fled to the hills, searching for some semblance of safety. Leaders made futile attempts to form a unified front, but it was clear to all that Earth had no chance. The Solari had already won, but they had one fatal flaw. They underestimated humanity's will to survive. What the Solari couldn't know was that beneath their feet, beneath the remains of the cities they had destroyed, humanity was ready. Project Horizon was not a myth. It wasn't just some distant dream. It was a reality, one that had been carefully hidden, nurtured, and perfected in secrecy. The Horizon wasn't just an invention. It was a statement. It was the answer to a question no one had dared ask. What if humanity didn't go quietly? What if Earth's last hope wasn't surrender, but defiance? As the world above burned deep under the Arctic ice, the secret command center hummed with activity. The Horizon, the ultimate warship, began to stir. Massive engines roared to life. The ship's massive armored hull shimmered as its systems powered up, a monstrous creature coming to life after years of slumber. Its primary weapon systems locked into place, each one capable of causing destruction on a scale the Solari had never seen before. And its engines, designed to pull power from the very core of stars, hummed with energy, ready to launch. Humanity's most brilliant minds, soldiers, engineers, and scientists, gathered around their control stations. They knew this was their final chance. The Solari had made their mistake. They thought Earth was a young, weak planet. They thought humanity was just a small, insignificant species that had never faced anything beyond its own wars. They didn't know that the people of Earth had already prepared for something like this. They didn't know that the heart of Earth's survival was built to stand against empires like theirs. The final test for the Horizon was about to begin. On the surface, chaos reigned. Across every continent, people stared at the sky in disbelief, watching as the Solari forces landed and began to claim Earth for their own. The global defense systems were collapsing under the weight of the Solari's superior technology. Earth had been caught unprepared. But what the invaders didn't realize was that humanity had been working in secret for decades, preparing for a war they had never seen coming. The first sign of humanity's new weapon came in the form of a sudden shift in the weather patterns, a massive disturbance in the atmosphere, a shockwave of energy that seemed to come from nowhere. And then, from beneath the Arctic, the Horizon emerged. The first human starship to ever leave Earth's atmosphere, the first weapon ever built to fight against an invader. At first, the Solari didn't understand what was happening. The horizon rose from the ice, its massive form cutting through the sky with an almost terrifying grace. It wasn't just a ship. It was a fortress, a living beast of technology and willpower designed to destroy anything in its path. The sky crackled with energy as the ship's engines powered up, propelling it into space at incredible speed. The world below, still burning with the flames of invasion, could only watch in awe and disbelief. Captain Mira Grant stood at the helm of the horizon, gripping the controls with a determined, steady hand. She had known this moment was coming, had trained for it her entire life, but the weight of it still felt immense. Her eyes flickered to the main display, where the Solari mothership loomed large, its gleaming surface casting an eerie, pale light across the battle-torn landscape of Earth. "This is it," she whispered to herself. Her crew was silent, all of them aware of the weight of the moment. Each person on board the Horizon had given everything for this one shot. Friends, families, even their own identities. They had all signed up for this, knowing the stakes. Earth's survival wasn't just a matter of winning this battle. It was about survival on a scale that humanity had never known before. "Launch trajectory confirmed," said Lieutenant Roberts, his voice steady but tense. "We're locked onto the Solari mothership. We're ready, Captain." Mira nodded, her fingers dancing across the console. "Engage the primary engines. Let's show them what Earth is capable of." The Horizon surged forward, faster than anything humanity had ever built. Its massive engines tore through the atmosphere, and for the first time since the Solari had arrived, the invaders began to realize something. They were no longer alone. Humanity was about to fight back. The Horizon soared through the thinning atmosphere, its enormous hull cutting through the sky like a beast finally unleashed. The wind screamed around it, but it didn't falter. Each of its thrusters burned with enough power to level entire cities, but the ship was moving with terrifying precision. It was no longer just a vehicle. It was humanity's symbol of resistance. On the bridge, Captain Mira Grant stood resolute, her eyes fixed on the massive holographic display that showed the Solari mothership growing larger with each passing second. The gap between them was closing, but the distance between Earth's hope and its doom was also shrinking. Mira's mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts: strategy, humanity's survival, and the overwhelming weight of her responsibility. "Commander Lawson," Mira called out, her voice unwavering despite the chaos building in her chest. "Status of the ship's systems?" "Shields at 70% and holding steady," Lawson reported, his hands flying across the console. His face was pale, but his voice never wavered. "Primary weapons are online, but we're getting a lot of interference from their technology. It's like they've adapted faster than we expected. They know we're coming." "Of course they know," Mira muttered. The Solari had been watching Earth long before they ever made their first move. They knew the power of their technology, knew the threat humanity posed. Mira had no illusions about the battle ahead. The Solari were not like the invaders Earth had dealt with in the past. Their ships, their weapons, everything about them screamed superiority. And yet here was humanity, standing up for its existence with a weapon the galaxy had never seen before. The Horizon wasn't just a ship. It was a living testament to human ingenuity, defiance, and desperation. It had been built for one thing: survival. It was an extension of humanity's spirit, a manifestation of everything humans had fought for since the dawn of their civilization. It was designed to outlast the darkest days, to hold the line when it seemed like all was lost. And now, it was time for that promise to be fulfilled. "Targeting systems online," said Lieutenant Roberts, his voice cutting through the tension in the bridge. "Captain, the Solari mothership's defensive systems are powering up. They're preparing to fire." Mira's grip tightened on the command chair. "Give them everything we've got," she ordered, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of finality. Initiate primary weapon systems. Target the energy cores. Yes, Captain, Roberts responded, without hesitation. The Horizon's cannons hummed to life. Huge energy cells fired up in rapid succession, powering the ship's arsenal. The primary weapon system, a massive cannon capable of discharging energy bolts that could obliterate entire fleets, locked onto the Solari mothership. Mira could feel the vibrations in the floor, the hum of power surging through the ship like a living, breathing creature. This was it. The first strike. Mira glanced at her crew, their faces reflected in the glow of the holographic displays. They were ready. The crew of the Horizon had trained for years, facing the impossible odds that had once seemed like a dream, a fight against an empire that spanned the stars. And now, they were about to prove the impossible wrong. Firing, Roberts announced. A blast of pure energy erupted from the Horizon's cannon, a brilliant, blinding burst of power that lit up the sky. The light was so intense that it temporarily blinded the crew, but Mira didn't flinch. She had known this moment would come, and now she had no choice but to see it through. The energy bolt shot across the vastness of space, aimed straight for the heart of the Solari mothership. Mira watched, her heart pounding, as the beam closed the distance between them. The Solari ship, a fortress of advanced technology, seemed unshaken by the blast. Its energy shields flared, absorbing the hit, but only barely. There was a flash of gold as the shields flexed and buckled, then stabilized. The Solari ship wasn't down. It was still standing. "They're tougher than we thought," Lawson said grimly, watching the data scroll across his screen. "The shields are holding, but we've definitely damaged them. We'll need another shot." Another shot. Mira's mind raced. The Solari weren't going to go down easy, but this wasn't just about destroying their ships. It was about sending a message. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity wasn't a species to be swept aside. "Captain," a voice crackled through the comms. It was Lieutenant Zhang, one of the Horizon's tactical officers. "We've got incoming. Solari fighters are launching from the mothership." Mira's eyes widened. Fighters! She hadn't expected them to be so bold, so quick to engage. The Solari were powerful, but they hadn't expected humanity to strike back so hard. But now, they were going to see what humanity could really do. "Deploy the Raptors," Mira ordered, her voice steady despite the tension building in her chest. The Raptors, sleek, fast, and armed with some of the most devastating weaponry humanity had ever created, shot from the Horizon's hangar bay. They darted into the atmosphere like a swarm of angry wasps, eager to strike down any foe that dared challenge them. The Solari fighters, sleek and deadly, twisted in the air like predators, their weapons charging as they locked on to their targets. "Engagement in 10 seconds, Zhang called. Mira gritted her teeth. The fighters were fast, but the Raptors were faster. They had been designed for this kind of combat. Speed, agility, and firepower all combined into one deadly package. The first few moments were chaotic, with bursts of energy and flashing lights lighting up the sky. The Raptors engaged with a fury that would have stunned anyone who witnessed it, weaving through the Solari fighters, dodging their attacks with inhuman precision and returning fire with deadly force. One by one, the Solari fighters exploded in fiery bursts as the Raptors tore them apart, their agile frames outmaneuvering the heavier, slower Solari ships. "5 down," Zhang called out, his voice a mix of exhilaration and disbelief. "We're holding our own, Captain." Mira didn't answer. She couldn't afford to. The battle was only beginning, and there was still much more to do. The Solari mothership, despite taking a hit, remained a formidable opponent. And with their fighters now in the fray, things were about to get a lot more complicated. The space around the horizon was becoming a battlefield, a chaotic mess of ships, weapons, and fire. "Targeting system malfunction," Roberts reported urgently. "We've lost connection to the mothership's energy core." Mira cursed under her breath. The Solari were adapting quickly, countering their every move, but she wasn't going to back down. Not now. "Switch to manual targeting," she barked, her voice carrying across the bridge. "We'll make it work." The crew moved quickly, recalibrating systems as the horizon bucked under the strain of the ongoing battle. Mira's heart raced as the ship shuddered under incoming fire, but she held firm, her gaze unwavering. This was humanity's moment. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight to show that Earth, despite everything, was worth saving. As the horizon adjusted its course, the Solari mothership loomed larger in front of them. Its massive energy cannons began to charge, the bright pulse of their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. And that's when Mira made her decision. "Prepare for a direct assault," she ordered, her voice cold with determination. "We're going in." "Prepare for a direct assault," Captain Mira Grant ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos of the bridge with an edge of finality. The crew around her moved quickly, responding to her command without hesitation. The moment had arrived, the moment that would determine the fate of Earth, and humanity had one chance to make it count. The horizon surged forward, its engines screaming with power, pushing the massive warship into the depths of the Solari fleet. Mira could see the Solari mothership now, massive and looming, its surface gleaming in the darkness of space, reflecting the light of distant stars. The Solari were ready for them. She could see their weapons priming, their energy cannons charging for the inevitable barrage. They were preparing to fight back with everything they had, but Mira wasn't about to let them have the first strike. "Captain, they're locking on with targeting systems," Lieutenant Zhang warned, his eyes fixed on his console as alarms began blaring across the bridge. "We've got incoming fire." Mira didn't flinch. Instead, her eyes stayed fixed on the screen ahead. There was no time for fear now, no time for second-guessing. This was the only way to win. She gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white. "Evasive maneuvers. Use the debris field as cover. We'll close the distance and hit them where it hurts." "Yes, Captain," Zhang responded instantly, relaying the command to the pilots and gunners. The horizon twisted and turned, sliding through the debris field left by the previous battle. Shattered fragments of Solari fighters and destroyed ships floated through space, and Mira used them as both shields and obstacles, weaving through them with uncanny precision. Each time an energy blast ripped past them, it came closer, too close, but the horizon's massive bulk was able to absorb the fire, the shields taking the brunt of the damage. The ship groaned under the weight of each incoming blast, but it held steady. The crew on the bridge worked feverishly, adjusting weapons systems, relaying orders, and maintaining the integrity of the ship. This was it, the moment when everything they had worked for came to fruition. "Shields at 40%, Captain," Commander Lawson called from his station. "Hull integrity is holding, but we're taking heavy hits. We're on borrowed time." "I know," Mira replied, her gaze still fixed on the mothership ahead. "We can't afford to slow down. We push forward no matter what." The horizon barreled forward, closing the distance with terrifying speed. The Solari mothership's massive energy cannons began to charge, and Mira saw the deadly arc of their fire form, a beam so powerful that it would tear through the horizon like paper if it made contact. "Brace for impact!" Mira shouted. The bridge trembled violently as the first beam of energy struck the horizon's shields, lighting up the dark void with an intense flash. The ship shuddered violently, and the lights flickered in response to the force of the blast. The shields held, but just barely. Mira's heart raced as she braced herself against the armrest, trying to steady her breathing. The battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "Shields holding at 15%, Lawson reported. "We've got to hit them now, or we're finished." Mira nodded grimly, her eyes never leaving the advancing mothership. It was a mammoth of steel and alien technology, but in her mind, it was no different from any other opponent humanity had faced. Overcoming insurmountable odds, this was humanity's specialty. "Target their engine cores," she commanded. "All firepower focused on their propulsion systems." "Confirmed," Lieutenant Roberts responded, his hands flying across the console as the Horizon's weapons systems locked onto the mothership. "Firing all weapons now." The Horizon's massive guns roared to life. Bolts of pure energy erupted from the ship, striking the Solari mothership with explosive force. The first few blasts hit the reinforced hull, creating small, glowing craters. But it wasn't enough. The Solari ship was too well armored, too formidable. Mira's brow furrowed. They needed something more, something to break through their defenses. Then, a new plan began to form in Mira's mind. The Solari had seen human technology, but they hadn't seen the Horizon at full power yet, and it was time to show them just how much Earth was willing to sacrifice. "Prepare the secondary weapons," Mira barked. "We're going in for a direct collision. Aim for their engine core and breach it from the inside out." The bridge fell silent at her command. For a moment, it was as if everyone had frozen. A direct collision? The idea was insane. But Mira wasn't about to back down. If they couldn't destroy the mothership from a distance, they would tear it apart from the inside. There was no more room for hesitation. "Captain, are you sure?" Lawson asked, his voice uncertain but still respectful. "A collision would almost certainly destroy the Horizon. We wouldn't survive it." "I know the risks," Mira replied, her voice steady. "But Earth isn't going to survive if we don't take this chance. This is our only shot." The crew hesitated for only a moment, and then, one by one, they began to prepare for the impossible. The ship's engines roared to life once more, and the Horizon pushed forward with everything it had, slamming through the remaining debris. The massive form of the Solari mothership loomed ahead, its weapons charging once again, but Mira's focus was absolute. The Horizon would strike with the power of a dying star. The Solari ship unleashed another blast of energy, but this time, Mira was ready. "Shields to maximum," she ordered. "Brace for impact." The Horizon surged forward like a battering ram, its hull creaking as it took the full brunt of the Solari's attack. The ship was rattled violently as energy bolts smashed against its already weakened shields, but it didn't stop. It couldn't. The bridge crew gritted their teeth, holding on as the ship surged forward, its trajectory locked on the heart of the Solari mothership's engines. Every inch of the ship was a struggle now, every system at its breaking point. The massive weapons systems, the engines, the weapons, all of it was being pushed to its limits. Mira's heart thundered in her chest as the final distance closed. There was no turning back now. "Collision in 10 seconds, Roberts called out, his voice tinged with awe and dread. "Get ready." The countdown was the longest moment of Mira's life, but there was no fear. There couldn't be. The only thing that mattered now was that humanity would go out fighting. 5, 4, 3. Roberts's voice echoed through the bridge, louder than any sound Mira had ever heard. 2. Mira gripped the armrest, her eyes fixed on the Solari mothership, which loomed like an indomitable giant in front of them. 1. With a deafening roar, the Horizon collided with the Solari mothership. The sound was beyond anything Mira had ever experienced, like the universe itself had been torn apart. The ship shuddered violently as the impact sent shockwaves through every deck. The hull of the Horizon tore into the heart of the Solari ship, its massive frame carving through the reinforced armor like paper. Inside the ship, alarms screamed as the air began to tremble with the force of the collision. Mira, momentarily thrown from her seat, could feel the heat and energy of the explosion even from where she sat. The Horizon's weapons systems had breached the Solari's defensive line, but it wasn't over yet. They had broken through, but they were still inside the beast. "Deploy boarding teams," Mira commanded, her voice cutting through the comms. "We're not done yet." The fate of Earth, and perhaps the galaxy itself, was now in their hands. The Horizon's massive bulk had rammed deep into the heart of the Solari mothership, tearing through the alien ship's hull like a titan smashing through a glass window. The force of the impact sent shockwaves through every deck, rattling the crew to their core. The once dominant roar of the ship's engines was now drowned out by the sounds of alarms blaring across the entire vessel. The battle was no longer about distance or firepower. It had become a brutal, visceral war for survival, fought within the very guts of the enemy ship. "Boarding teams, deploy!" Captain Mira Grant's voice rang out across the bridge, steely and determined. There was no time to hesitate. The Horizon had breached the Solari mothership, but now it was time for humanity's final assault. They were inside now, deep within the heart of the beast, and it was time to take the fight to the enemy. "Deploying boarding pods, Captain," Lieutenant Zhang confirmed as he rapidly worked his console, sending out the orders to the boarding crews. "We've got 15 minutes before the ship completely seals off the breach. Then we'll have to work fast," Mira said, her voice cutting through the chaos. She rose from her seat and turned towards the tactical screen. The Solari mothership loomed large, its systems already struggling to maintain cohesion after the massive breach. It was still standing, still fighting back, but its power was beginning to falter. Mira could feel it in the pit of her stomach. The Solari were beginning to realize that this battle was not going to go according to their plans. The boarding teams had been prepared for this moment their entire lives. They were humanity's best, trained in zero-gravity combat, in advanced alien technology, and in the art of survival under impossible circumstances. Their mission was clear: disable the mothership's critical systems, disable its weapons, and send a message to the Solari that Earth was not to be trifled with. Mira watched as the first of the boarding pods shot out from the Horizon, racing toward the gaping wound in the Solari mothership. The pods, sleek and compact, were designed for rapid deployment. They would slam into the enemy ship's interior with an explosive force, breaking through the hull and allowing the soldiers inside to initiate their mission. Each pod carried a small squad of elite soldiers, all heavily armed and ready to carry out whatever was necessary to disable the Solari ship from the inside. "Pods are in motion, Captain," Zhang reported, his fingers moving quickly over the console. "ETA to breach, 10 seconds. Mira nodded, her eyes flicking to the tactical display. There was no turning back now. The moment the pods breached the Solari mothership, the battle would be won or lost. There was no more room for mistakes. The pods slammed into the side of the Solari ship, their impact reverberating through the hull as they deployed their boarding teams. The soldiers inside were already moving, weapons drawn, charging into the darkness of the enemy ship. The sounds of combat echoed over the comms as the first shots rang out. Gunfire, explosions, the hiss of energy weapons, and the guttural screeches of the Solari forces as they tried to mount a defense. Mira's jaw clenched as she watched the live feed from the boarding pods. The first squad had made it inside, but they were immediately met with resistance. The Solari, while reeling from the initial assault, had regrouped quickly. Their warriors, tall and agile, appeared from the shadows, their alien armor shimmering in the dim light. They moved with terrifying speed, dodging gunfire, weaving between obstacles, and striking back with brutal force. But the humans were ready. These were soldiers who had fought their entire lives for this moment. They weren't just defending their homes, they were fighting for the very survival of their species. With precision and cold determination, they returned fire, cutting down Solari warriors one by one. "Keep pushing," a voice crackled through the comms, the leader of the first boarding team. "We've got to get to the command center, disable their navigation and weapons systems." The soldiers moved with military precision, clearing the path to the heart of the ship. The Solari were relentless, but the human soldiers fought back with equal ferocity, their movements a blur of lethal force. The air was thick with the scent of burning plasma and the sound of metal clashing with metal as the two sides waged their brutal war in the depths of the alien mothership. Mira's eyes stayed glued to the live feed. She could see the human soldiers pushing forward, breaching the next set of doors, engaging in close-quarters combat with the Solari's elite warriors. The stakes had never been higher. Each hallway, each room they cleared, brought them closer to the ship's command nexus, the beating heart of the Solari vessel. If they could reach it, they could cripple the mothership's control systems, rendering it useless. But time was running out. The Solari would not go down without a fight. "Captain," Lieutenant Roberts said urgently, his voice strained. "We're getting reports of heavy resistance in the lower decks. The Solari are adapting. They're deploying something new." "What do you mean?" Mira asked, narrowing her eyes. "They've released some kind of biological weapon," Roberts replied. "It's like nothing we've seen before. It's moving through the lower levels, and it's taking out our teams." Mira's heart skipped a beat. The Solari had clearly anticipated this battle. They had prepared for it in ways humanity had not considered. Biological weapons? That was an unknown variable, one they hadn't trained for. "We need to stop it before it reaches our teams," Mira said, her voice tight with urgency. "Send reinforcements to the lower decks, now." "We're on it," Roberts confirmed. "I'm rerouting the Raptors to assist." The Raptors, sleek combat drones armed with cutting-edge weaponry, had been deployed earlier in the battle to take down Solari fighters. Now, they were being called back to deal with the new threat in the lower levels of the mothership. Mira could only hope that it would be enough. The battle inside the Solari mothership raged on. The human soldiers pushed through wave after wave of Solari resistance, cutting down alien soldiers with brutal efficiency. But every step forward felt like a victory won at the cost of blood, both human and Solari. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning metal. As they advanced deeper into the ship, the corridors became narrower, the lighting dimmer, and the sounds of combat more intense. Mira's grip on the command chair tightened as she watched the live feeds. It was clear the boarding teams were making progress, but at what cost? More and more soldiers were falling, their bodies strewn across the cold, metallic floors of the alien ship. The Solari were adapting to the human tactics, switching to more defensive strategies, and countering each move with brutal precision. "We can't hold them off forever," Commander Lawson said grimly, his voice tinged with concern. "The ship's interior is starting to buckle. They're reinforcing the command center, putting up barriers." "I know," Mira said, her voice unwavering. "We're not leaving without disabling this ship. We've come too far." The soldiers were closing in on the heart of the Solari mothership. But Mira knew that even if they succeeded in reaching the command center, the Solari were not going to give up without one last desperate attempt to stop them. Every second counted now. "Prepare for full engagement," Mira shouted. "We're taking this ship down, together." The battle was nearing its climax. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the galaxy, was now in the hands of the brave souls who fought in the depths of the Solari mothership. And Mira Grant, captain of the Horizon, would not let Earth go quietly into the night. The battle inside the Solari mothership had reached its fever pitch. The human soldiers, battered and bloodied, pushed forward with every ounce of strength they had left. The Solari were relentless, their reinforcements flooding in from every direction. But the humans had one advantage the Solari had not counted on: stubbornness, a refusal to yield, and the primal need to protect their home. Mira's pulse quickened as she watched the final push unfold on the bridge. The command center of the Solari mothership loomed ahead, an impenetrable fortress of alien technology surrounded by a dozen armed guards. It was their last stand. If they could disable the control nexus, the entire mothership would be rendered useless. But the Solari were prepared for this, and they weren't about to give up without a fight. "We're almost there, Captain," Commander Lawson said, his voice crackling over the comms. "The command center is just ahead, but there's a heavy blockade in place. Our teams are already engaging, but we're losing men." Mira's grip on her chair tightened. She could see it in their faces. They were running out of time. The Solari knew they were close to the heart of their mothership, and they were willing to sacrifice everything to stop them. The air in the ship had turned thick with smoke and the acrid scent of battle. The stench of blood, both human and alien, mixed in the atmosphere as the fighting raged on. Every floor, every hallway, every room had been a battlefield, and now this final stretch was the culmination of all their sacrifices. "Don't stop now," Mira said, her voice firm. "Push forward no matter the cost. Earth is depending on us." The soldiers, their faces hidden behind dark visors, gave no response. They didn't need to. They knew the stakes. Each step they took was a step toward ensuring humanity's survival. As the final barricade in the command center fell, the last of the Solari resistance scrambled, trying desperately to buy enough time to prevent the inevitable. But it was too late. The human soldiers breached the final door, pouring into the chamber like a flood of unrelenting determination. Inside the command center, it was eerily silent. The Solari's central nexus stood in the center of the room, its pulsating core a living, breathing mass of alien energy. It was a strange, organic structure, intertwined with metallic tendrils and arcane runes etched into its surface. The center of the Solari Empire's power, now vulnerable to a human assault. Mira could feel the air change as her boarding teams reached the core. They had done it, but the battle wasn't over. The core had its own defenses, biological weapons and energy fields that could tear through any human soldier in seconds. The humans, though, were ready for this. "We're planting the charges now," a voice crackled through Mira's comms. It was Lieutenant Zhang, leading one of the teams. "We've got the core exposed, but it's heavily shielded. We'll need a minute to plant the charges and ensure the core is disabled." The tension was unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity as Mira counted down in her head. The Solari might have been resilient, but humanity had something far stronger than just advanced technology. They had resolve. They had unity. They had Earth. "Hold tight," Mira muttered, her voice steady. "You've got 1 minute." The sound of energy blasts echoed through the comms as the last of the Solari forces tried to mount a final defense. But the soldiers didn't waver. They kept pushing forward, their mission clear. As Mira watched, the final charge was planted, a bright blue light flashing across the control center. The countdown had begun. "Charges set. 30 seconds, Zhang said, his voice crisp. "Get ready to fall back." Mira's heart raced as she turned to Commander Lawson. "Prepare the horizon to withdraw. We're getting out of here." The countdown to the destruction of the Solari mothership had begun. The ships outside the airlock had already begun to retreat, ready to get clear of the blast radius. But they had to leave in time. It had to be perfect. 10 seconds, Zhang said over the comms, his voice now carrying an undercurrent of hope. For the first time in this entire battle, Mira saw the glint of victory in his tone. 5, 4, 3. The tension in the air was palpable. Mira felt it in her chest, in the pit of her stomach. This was it. 2, 1. The ship trembled violently as a massive explosion rippled through the Solari mothership, a shockwave of pure energy that reverberated across space. The blast rocked the horizon, sending a jolt through every deck. The once proud and untouchable Solari mothership, the heart of their invasion force, began to crumble. Its massive frame groaned, and for a brief moment it seemed as though the very fabric of reality itself was bending under the force of the destruction. And then there was silence. The Solari mothership was no more. Mira's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the destruction on the tactical display. The massive ship, now little more than a cloud of burning wreckage and debris, was rapidly disintegrating in the vacuum of space. The gravity of the moment began to sink in. They had done it. Earth had struck back, and the invaders had been defeated. But the battle was far from over. Mira knew this. The Solari were not just one ship, not just one fleet. They were a vast, ancient empire that spanned the stars, and the destruction of their flagship would only be a momentary setback. There would be more, many more battles to come. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal from Earth," Lieutenant Roberts said, his voice unsteady. "It's from the planet's surface. They're asking for confirmation of our status." Mira closed her eyes for a brief moment. She had led her crew to this victory, but the war wasn't finished. Not yet. But humanity had proven one thing today. Earth wasn't a defenseless world anymore. They had shown the galaxy that they would not bow, that they would not be erased. With a steady voice, Mira gave her command, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. "Tell them, Earth is still standing." And as the horizon sped through the remnants of the Solari mothership, Mira Grant allowed herself a brief moment of relief. They had won this battle, but the war? The war had only just begun.